Okay, so good evening, everyone, and trust we are doing good. So, welcome you to this live session with my Unbreaking Up, our webinar series, and we are in the season of love, basically, and we are going to be going through some heartwarming sessions that is marvelous, basically. And we're not just going to be doing this alone. As my Unbreaking Up, we are bringing in an expert, basically, to enlighten us more on this topic that we'll be discussing today. And excuse me. And for today's topic, the topic we'll be having today, basically, we are going to be discussing love, attachment, and emotional safety, creating relationships that heal. And why this topic is essential to us in my Unbreaking Up is because we are currently in the love season. We all know Valentine is around the corner, and everybody's celebrating love one way or the other. And yes, it's important we discuss about this so everybody can be properly aware. Everybody can be fully knowledgeable in that aspect of their lives. And once again, my name is Marvelous Ayomide, admin manager and operations manager in my Unbreaking Hub. And yes, so that's that. So we have a wonderful guest on today's live session, and I must say she's one of the best persons I've followed closely for a while, and her name is Mrs. Oluchi Tunde Oni, and she's the CEO of the Tala Company. She's a certified relationship and marriage counselor. I must say, I've been following her videos, I've been following her up through and through, and I can say she's knowledgeable, she's smart, she's beautiful, she's intelligent, and I'm sure she has a lot for us today. And in a few seconds, I'm going to be bringing her up on today's live session. And without no further ado, I'm going to be bringing Miss Oluchi to introduce herself and say a few words before we go fully into today's session. Thank you. So, Miss Oluchi,
Hey,
yes.
good evening. Hello, Marvelous. Hello, everyone. Great to be here. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I don't know what else to add to what you've already said. So, only that I'm very excited to be here, especially because of the topic we'll be talking about, love, attachment, and emotional safety. It's one that is very I'll say very dear to me, but before I start speaking, I think I'll stop here for now. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Miss Oluchi. As I said, she's beautiful, she's smart, she's intelligent, she's gorgeous.
Thank you.
And I'm personally excited to hear from you. I followed your videos closely. Not like I've been stalking you,
Wow.
but I've followed your videos closely. And I remember the last one I watched was talking about savings and spending and planning in before marriage
Mm,
and during marriage. And I was like,
mm.
she's going to come and spill wisdom for us today. She's going to come and spill wisdom. And before we go
I'll try my
into
best.
before we go into it fully, I just want you to tell me what love, attachment, and emotional safety. What does it mean to you, Miss Oluchi?
What does it mean to me? I'll say
Yes.
first of all, so let me break it down to the three things because there are three words here. Love, first of all, I would say is should I say the very bane of our existence, right? As human beings, we are all looking for love in one way or the other. Some people would label it as self-love, some other people romantic love, some other people love in friendship, some other people love in their close circle in family. So love really is a vital and integral part of us as human beings, right? And then attachment. I think anyone who just hears the word attachment, they just kind of see it as, being attached to something, for lack of a better word. But for me, as a mental health professional, attachment is something that existed even before we got into adolescence or adulthood, so most likely from our very early on age, right? So love, attachment, they kind of go hand in hand. So the way we want to receive love is most likely from the attachment that we had growing up. And then emotional safety, I think, is something everybody's also looking for, just that place where you can lay your head without having to feel judged, without having to feel like your own is too much safe, that kind of thing. So that's what I would say love, attachment, and emotional safety is for me.
Okay, so that was awesome. That was awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you for breaking that down. As I said, you are knowledgeable, and I'm so excited to be here. And that leads me to this next question. And
Mm.
basically, the question goes: how do early attachment experiences influences the way adult shows up in their romantic and interpersonal relationship?
That's a very heavy question, right? And I want to be as relatable and as understandable as possible. So if we're talking about how this appears in our adult relationships, it appears everywhere, to be very honest, right? It's not something that we can pick and choose. And and I think even before we even go ahead to start talking about the complexity of how this shows up in adult relationships, Marvelous, are you here? Because your video just went off. I want to be sure.
Yes, yes, I'm here. I'm here with
Okay.
you.
Yes, here. All right, fantastic. Um, I think it would make sense to also kind of break down what this attachment is, right? For the sake of everybody here, because I don't want to imagine that, oh, everybody knows what attachment experience or attachment styles are, So to start with, what are attachment styles? Attachment styles, or like you in your own question state, attachment experiences. These are ways we form emotional bonds based off on the relationships we had with our caregivers from right as as far back as infancy. And when I say caregivers, I mean our parents. So if you grew up with your parents and your primary caregivers, if you grew up with guardians, whatever the case is, however it is that love was translated in that relationship is what's helped you understand emotional bond. And now that's now the lens that you tend to see love through. You tend to interpret love, you tend to receive love as well as even giving love. So it's how you interpret, okay, is this love safe, is it not safe, is it consistent, is it performative, that really is what attachment style is, to kind of put it plainly. And then we have four major ones. We have the anxious attachment style, we have the avoidance, we have the disorganized, as well as the secure attachment style. But most times people talk more about three, which is avoidance, anxious, and secure. So if we're not answering the question as to how does this show up in adult life, it shows up everywhere because this is something that you grew up knowing right from infancy. And so it's the knowledge that you then take into your adolescent life, into your adult life, into teenage life, from your romantic relationships to your friendships, right? That's how you interpret love. That's how you give love. That's how you see love. That's how you understand love. And so it's important for us to understand what our journey is, from growing up and how that kind of affects who we are now in different phases of our relationships.
Things
Hello?
one of the things I was able to, sorry, my network went off. So one of the things that I was able to pick up, I don't know if you're following.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So one of the things I was able to pick up is basically is the way we experience love growing up. So I was able to
Mm-hmm.
pick that as a kind of love and in the attachment way. I don't know if I got that correctly, but that just
Mm-hmm.
stuck in me. And I want to bring this up. I want to bring this next question in relation to that first question. And I wanted to say what are the common signs of secure, anxious, and avoided attachment patterns in relationships? So, like, what are the common signs we
Okay.
see in individuals?
Okay, beautiful. That's a beautiful question. And so again, I'll break it down into romantic relationships and then platonic relationships because in some ways they can appear differently in different cases, right? So let's start with the anxious attachment style. Right. First things first, understanding the anxious attachment style is these are people who in childhood, right, they had caregivers that were not very, very stable. They are here today, there tomorrow. And so there's usually now the idea of, okay, is this person here for me? That's when you begin to see children who are clingy, who are needy, because there hasn't been enough stability. And so when these children now grow up to become adults in their romantic relationship, what that then now looks like is there's a need for reassurance. You meet people or you date people who every time they want to know, do you really love me? Do you really care for me? They're always asking for that reassurance because of what they experienced in childhood. There's also the fear of abandonment, right? They're always worried that any slight provocation, you're going to leave them, even though that might just not be the case, right? So there's that. There are people that most likely they're always texting you very frequently, asking you about your whereabouts. If you don't reply their texting 0.006 seconds, they're already calling you to ask, what's going on? Where are you? Is it that you don't love me anymore? Didn't you see my text? They always act very, very irrational in some cases. And then how that also applies in relationship is that there's a need for constant validation, right? Aside you telling them that you love them, they want to know that they are more than enough for you, and that also you see that play out in jealousy. If they see you talking to somebody else, they begin to compare, they begin to think that, you're on to the next person, they're not enough for you, there's a lot of jealousy, there's a lot of manipulation as well. Sometimes they can even give a lot of themselves just to keep that relationship intact. They're the ones that will sacrifice the most, even when things are not working well. They're the ones that will make sure that maybe they will give their school fees if they're dating a guy in school, or maybe they will give up their job because they want to make the other person happy. So they are heavily sacrificial, and the sacrifice usually is to make sure that the relationship is being kept, right? Even when it is toxic. Now, in friendships, what I would look like is you see friends that easily say things like, oh, yeah, you don't call me, you don't check up on me, you don't check up on me often, I'm the one always reaching out to you. Meanwhile, maybe you as a friend, you're just busy, but they will always interpret that gap, whether it's a 2 day gap, 3 days gap. In fact, they cannot even have friends that they've not spoken to in 1 month. They will just feel like, there's no friendship here anymore. Sometimes they will overanalyze your actions or your reactions to start saying things like, you don't love me, I'm not good enough, I'm not a good friend for you, that kind of thing. And sometimes they often feel like they're too much. So that's for the anxious attachment style. Now let's now go on to the avoidant attachment style. Now these ones, they're the ones that it's called avoidant or dismissive attachment styles. This one, they're the ones that grew up with caregivers that dismiss their feelings, caregivers that were never really around. And even if they are around, they are very, very distant, right? So you see children who have this attachment styles are people who their parents are always working, or either they're never around, they will send them off to one grandma's place or one auntie's place, they are never really there for them. Sometimes they might even be there, but they are just not there emotionally, they just silence how they feel. And so those type of children now grow up to be heavily independent, just so that nobody will use them to do see finish. They now begin to rely on their capabilities, rely on themselves. Now, when they now become adults, how that now interprets or how that affects their relationship, romantic relationship, is that they begin to struggle when it has to do with vulnerability. They are the ones that don't know how to say I love you. They're the ones that don't know how to say I care about you. They usually would say that they are the hard guys, but they just have walls up because they've learned how to just depend on themselves alone. So they're very highly independent, and most times they pull away once it looks like the relationship is getting too intimate. Emotions have to be shown. We have to talk about our feelings. They just run away from it, and sometimes they can even say things like their partners are too clingy when the partner is really looking for reasonable sense of emotional bonding in that relationship. So they're the ones that are usually the hard guys, but really the hard guy is just that they've learned how to be independent rather than depend on anyone. And what's relationship? Relationship is dependence on codependence on each other, right? And so in friendships, what that would look like is that they are the kind of friends that when you text them, they will not respond for days. They will come and say, "Oh no, I was busy," or "I missed your message," but really they're just like, "Leave me alone." That's how they think about this. They're the ones also that would have a lot of casual acquaintances, but they will never really have deep, close friendships. Because for you to be close with somebody is that they have to see into you, they have to see your weaknesses, they have to see your vulnerabilities, and they run away from anything that makes them vulnerable or emotional. And sometimes they think that having emotional conversation is very, very unnecessary. They're the ones that will say things like, I beg, it's not that deep. But some things are very deep. And so that's how they show up in friendships. Now, the third one is the disorganized attachment style. These ones are the ones that their parents were almost like, how would I put it? Their parents were frightening. You will hear children that say things like, "I'm afraid of my daddy. Once I hear daddy's horn like this, everybody just runs away because they can't stand being in the same room with daddy because daddy is a fierce man, or maybe even mommy is a fierce woman." They grew up in abusive homes, whether verbally or even physically. If they just say, "Bam," their father has carried the bells to beat them, or their mother has slapped them, things like that. So they are the ones that when they now grow up, there's almost like a confusion, which is the person that is meant to love me and take care of me is the person that is maltreating me this way. And so there is usually a confusion as to, should I receive this love? Should I give this love? Is this for real? Is this not for real? That's how they are in childhood. So how does that now relate to people who are adults in their relationships? Is that they crave intimacy, but also that intimacy frightens them because they feel like once you get close to them, you will judge them or you would even punish them for being vulnerable, for showing who they are. So they will pursue you intensely. I hear of guys that, there was this girl that they were trying to check and they pursued her. But once they got her like this, they just withdrew. Just wonder, what did I do? Is everything okay? It's because of the attachment style that they have, which is disorganized, right? And sometimes they often overreact to conflicts. It's almost like using a gun to eat a cockroach. You be wondering, what did I say that is wrong? How come they are reacting this way? It's because of the attachment style that they had growing up. And sometimes they also struggle to trust, even though they really want this closeness. There's almost like a push and pull kind of situation with the disorganized attachment style. And so in friendships, all the things I've said in romantic relationships still apply. But just as an addition is that in their friendships, they find it very hard to regulate their emotions. They're the ones that today they are happy, tomorrow they are sad, next tomorrow you don't know what to expect from them. They are very, very up and down. And then the last attachment style is now the secure one. That's called the secure attachment style. These ones are the ones that their caregivers were so sweet. They understood their emotions. They helped them to understand their own emotions. They're very Oops. Okay. Just going to hold it. Okay. Marvelous, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. All right, so they are the ones that their caregivers understood their emotions, helped them to understand their emotions. So there was a lot of warmth, a lot of love that they grew up in secure emotional nets, right? So they did not lack love. They are not the people that we would say, oh, didn't grow up in an environment where there was a lot of love to give. And so they have healthy relationships with their caregivers and with people around them. And so how that will look like in romantic relationship is that in their relationship, they are the ones that know how to do communication. They would say what is on their mind. They will also expect you to say what is on your mind. They don't run away from vulnerability. They don't run away from conflict. They know how to handle conflict very well. They are reliable and trust them. They are emotionally mature. That's really the word to describe them. They are very, very emotionally mature. And so in their friendships, they know how to be vulnerable without feeling like you're going to gaslight them or you're going to punish them for being vulnerable. They're also reliable friends. They are the kind of friends also that will respect your boundaries. If you say to them, I will need some time, maybe they did something wrong to you and you tell them, I just need some time to process this. They wouldn't feel threatened by you. They won't start saying, are you leaving me? What's going on? No. They will let you have your space. And when you're ready, you'll come back to them. They don't feel like any they don't feel threatened by conflict or by vulnerability. So that's how the secure attachment style shows up in relationship as well as friendships.
Okay, so that was very, very detailed, and I was also lost in the whole explanation, honestly. And one question was in my mind. This might not be as
Mm,
direct as the other questions,
okay.
but like, does
Okay.
someone who suffer from anxiety
Mm.
would also have an anxious attachment style, or you can have anxiety and not have anxious attachment style, or you have to have both
Mm.
together? Did you get that?
Mm. Okay. Yes, I got that. I think we can't say it's either or because we need to understand where's the anxiety coming from, right? Is it coming from a thing of you don't feel like you are good enough? Is it coming from just feeling like things are not happening the way they are meant to happen? So depending on what is causing the anxiety, then we'll be able to know if that anxiety will show up as an attachment style in your relationship. So it's not either or. It's not mutually it's not what's the English now? It's not mutually exclusive, right? It's one or the other. I don't know if you understand what I just said.
Yes, that was very detailed, and that was very detailed. So based on that question, now I'm going to my next question, and it's quite similar to that. But the question basically is, how can individuals now recognize their own attachment style without self blame or shame? Like, let's say somebody has the anxious attachment style. So, how do they handle that without feeling, okay, I'm going to be too much, I'm going to be a lot for my partner, I'm going to be a lot for my husband? So, how do I identify that, and how do I deal with it without feeling self blame, basically?
Okay, so how do you deal with that? Firstly, right, I think is to understand that the attachment style that each person has is not a death sentence. First things first, it's not a death sentence. And also, don't blame your parents for it. Because yes, it stems from the relationship you have with your caregivers, but many caregivers don't know better than what they've done. And so blaming them is not going to add or remove from what you have to deal with. Right? Because I sit in counseling sessions with people and we are kind of identifying their attachment style, and then they say things like, wow, so this is my father's fault, this is my mother's fault. Why didn't they do better? I'm like, no, what they know is what they did. If they knew better, they would do better. So that's the first thing. There's no point blaming your parents for it, but understanding that, okay, this is something that I have to deal with. And so the question, like you asked now, is how can you recognize? How can you recognize is number one, intentionality, right? Which is also why these conversations are being had. So now you've heard that there are four different attachment styles. So go and read up on it and begin to kind of put the patterns in place. Okay, so anxious attachment style shows up as this. Are there situations where I have exemplified these characteristics, right? Are there times where I've shown that I can be avoidant, right? So you have to sit with yourself to be able to identify where and if you have any of these attachment styles. That's the first thing. Sit with yourself. Reflection is the only way you'll be able to know how to recognize these attachment styles. And if you say without self blame or shame, it's understanding that everybody on this earth he has one or multiple attachment styles. And so self-shaming yourself it's not going to make any difference, right? Because self-shaming yourself means that there's something that I'm dealing with that nobody else is dealing with. And that's a lie because all of us are dealing with our own. I've had to deal with being avoidance. I've had to do with and having the anxious attachment style, right? So everybody has what they are dealing with. So you have to understand that it is common to man, right? And then lastly, I would say speak to a professional. It's not just enough to recognize it, but it's also how do you work from there into the security that you need, right? And sometimes as well, I would even say seek professional help first of all, even before having to go through the whole cycle on your own, because you might think that, oh, I have avoidance style. But by the time you begin to talk to a professional, you realize that, okay, it's not actually avoidance that I have. Okay, maybe it's anxious that I have. So I would always say, don't self-diagnose first. see if you can speak to a professional. If you can't, then you can now go the route of, going online, reading up on all of them. And sometimes even just doing a brief self-test with your friends and your family. You say, okay, I read about this thing. Do you think this is me? Do you think I exhibit this? Do you think I exhibit that? And then your friends and your family will be able to give you more unbiased reflection for you to then go ahead with.
Okay, that was very, very detailed, and certainly after this session, I'm going to obviously make more research based on what you said, and learn more. And I'm sure if I have questions, I'll be able to throw them to you in my own little ways. So that was very detailed. And this leads to the next question. And what does emotional safety looks like in everyday relationship, and why is it essential? So how do I know if I'm safe with my partner? I'm still single, but when I get into that level, and for the sake of our viewers, so like, how do we know we are emotionally safe with the person we are with, and how do we know, and why is it essential? Why is it essential in relationships?
Okay. So how do you know that there's emotional safety in relationship is number one, you can be yourself without the fear of being judged. Excuse me. Also the fear of being misunderstood, without even the fear of being punished. Because some people fear that, oh, if I tell my partner this, they might punish me for who I used to be or for what I've done. Right. So there's that also, that there's no fear of punishment. There's also no fear of withdrawal, whereby you share something with your partner and they're just like, this is too much. I can't handle this. I'm just going to pull in out or pull out of the relationship, right? So that's the first thing. You can be yourself without having any of these fears. Then secondly, you can have disagreements without it having to threaten the life of the relationship. We have sometimes I sit with couples who have disagreements, and then there is the I'm going to break up with you. This is not working anymore. But that's not true. Disagreements only just points to the lack or the presence of something in your relationship. Whether it's a lack of understanding, whether it's a lack of trust, or even the presence of something that shouldn't be there. Presence of fear, presence of worry, presence of anxiety. So I always tell my clients that do not run away from conflict. If anything, embrace it. It's the way you handle conflict that makes it either bad or good. And so if you're in a relationship whereby every conflict leads to we are breaking up, there's no emotional safety in that, right? And also, if you're in a relationship where your vulnerability is now used as a weapon, there's no safety at all. And what that would look like is, okay, you share something with them. Maybe you say something like, oh, you tell your partner that you're dating that, oh, I went to this party and I saw this guy that was really entering my eye. I just felt like, this guy is fine, though. But I know that I'm with you and I'm not going to do anything with this attraction. You tell your partner this in confidence. And then the next time both of you are outside, he sees the guy and is like, that's how you like this one too, Abby. That's how you're going to leave me for him. I'm like, why are you using my vulnerability as a weapon? That's very bad. And so it now becomes a thing of, can I trust this person well enough to say how I'm feeling? Like I said to you at the beginning, that relationship is codependence on each other. So if I can't depend on you to be truthful, to be honest about my feelings or honest about where I am in life, some men cannot even be honest with their ladies or with their wives, because there's already the fear of, if I tell her now that I don't have enough money, she's going to now use that as a weapon next time to say, that's how that you're broke. You cannot even pay for this. You cannot even pay for that. That's like, come on. So if there is a fear of vulnerability used as a weapon, then there's no emotional safety there, right? Because it matters that without having emotional safety in a relationship, then there's no relationship really. And then you begin to now see people performing in their relationship or even hiding who they are in their relationship. And again, there's no relationship if we're always just putting our best foot forward. Relationship is ugly. It gets ugly sometimes. It gets beautiful sometimes. So we want to know who you are through and through. And if you can't show who you are through and through, then there's no emotional safety.
Okay, that was detailed, and I'm getting constantly lost. Like constantly, I'm just blown away. I'm not going to lie. I've been following your videos, but I didn't know I was going to get this drawn into this conversation today.
Wow.
And
Okay.
honestly, like I'm really really immersed in today's topic. And okay, before I go out of bounds and go to this question, I want to run through one question again, and I'm sure while you answer this question, it's going to certainly answer the question I have at the back of my mind. So the question
Okay.
is: so how can partners intentionally build trust, emotional reassurance, and healthy boundaries? So why this question
Hmm.
is important or is quite sentimental to me is, as humans, sometimes we might tend to how would I put it? We might tend to break this trust the person having us. As you said
Hmm.
earlier now, okay, they went out or the girl went out before the guy, then she saw somebody and the whole thing. And sometimes as guys, or I don't know, but as guys, sometimes we might get emotional about it because we don't really often
Hmm.
expect the other gender to be the one to act one kind. So sometimes we might get stressed and like, wow, you saw this person, da 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 da, and it might become a mess, not an actual mess, but it might actually become a sort of friction between yourself and your
Hmm.
partner. So if you had broken that trust, so how can you intentionally build it back? How can you reassure the person, and how can you make sure that there's some sort of healthy boundary amongst you within rather you and your partner?
Hmm. Okay, that's a good question. Again, also very packed. So I'll kind of dissect it and take it one after the other, right? So if we talk about intentionally building trust, I would say the first place to start with that is if you say you are going to do something, do it. That's the first place to build trust. If you say, I'm going to stay by you, pick and thin, stay by the person. If you say, I'm going to be with you alone, be with only that person. If to even put it on a granular level, if you say, I'm going to work at 1 p.m., after work, I'm going home, I'm not going anywhere else. Do that thing you said you're going to do. And if for any reason you're going to not do it, inform the other person. That's the first and surest way to build trust. Say what, rather do what you say and say what you are going to do. Right, that's the first thing. The second thing, I think validating each other's emotions or feelings. That's one of the things that early on in my relationship with my husband, both of us agreed to do. That nobody's ever going to say something and the other person would discard or dismiss how that person is feeling. Even if you don't understand what the person is saying, even if you don't agree with what they are saying, the first thing that always comes out from both our mouths is, I understand or I hear what you are saying, right? Never to say, "Ah, how can you say that? What do you mean by that? Or your own is even too much. No, 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 no. You might not understand it doesn't mean that it's not a valid emotion or a valid feeling. So always acknowledge how the other person is feeling because that feeling is real to them. And who are you to say it is not real? So always acknowledge each other's feelings, right? And also I would say, and then to now move on to the boundary bit of it, which is how can you create healthy boundaries? I would say communication. Communication is always the key. Talk, 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 and talk some more. Never say that talking is too much. That's what you're in a relationship for. So talk about your feelings, talk about the weather, talk about the sun, talk about the moon, talk about every single thing, right? So what that talking really is talking with, should I say, with some strategy in mind, right? So what it will look like with your boundaries is okay. You did this thing the other day. I don't think I don't like the way I felt about it. It made me feel XYZ. And I'll quite appreciate it if it doesn't happen again. You see, just saying how you feel and what you want to happen next is already putting a boundary in place. Some people feel like, oh, boundaries are a wall up or boundaries are too serious. No, boundary is literally just saying, this is what I expect from you. This is what I would like you to do for me. It's really just putting your expectations as plain and as clearly as possible. And for the other person to accept the expectations and work with it. Right? That's really what the boundaries are. So always talk about it when things happen. And I also say, do not be reactive about it. Be more proactive about it, which is okay. Before the incident happens, you've already stated this is what I don't like. Oh, don't pass this boundary, or don't do this, or don't do that, or and sometimes some boundaries they don't even need to be stated. They are almost just kind of assumed. Number one, if you're in a relationship with somebody, don't cheat on them. They don't need to tell you, right? It's already almost is an unspoken rule. But just for other boundaries that are more unique to you, it's very important that you state them early on. You talk about them early on. If you see something that looks like it's going against that boundary, keep reinforcing the boundaries. Never get tired. Keep reinforcing those boundaries. Keep speaking about them over and over again. And for emotional reassurance, I think everything I've said just kind of applies to it, in terms of building trust and also in creating these boundaries. So,
Okay, so as I said, I knew when you go into that fully, you were going to answer the questions at the back of my mind. So I do want to see the questions, then have you go through that question again. But yeah, that was really helpful. And this brings me to the last question that we are going to be having in this session. And basically, is what practical steps can individuals take to break unhealthy relationships, cycles, and nurture emotionally secure and fulfilling connections? So, like, what steps can we take? What can we do to make sure that we are in secure and fulfilling relationships? Because we don't want to just keep going from here to here and keep having that break and keep doing and having breakfast in the Nigerian world.
Important.
How can we have fulfilling relationships? Like the one that we grow, we become better persons. Our partners also become better persons, and we actually go to become who we want to become in the future. So how can we do this? What practical steps do you have to share with us today,
How can you break unhealthy relationship cycles? First of all, what has been your pattern in the last 3 relationships? If you're able to check what your pattern is, then you would know if you have been in unhealthy relationships or not. Secondly, I would say be responsible for your actions. Many times people easily just say, oh, I was with a cheat, or oh, my boyfriend was not this, my girlfriend was not that. But it takes 2 to tango. You see, you cannot make a sound by using just one hand. It's 2 hands that you need, which means that in every relationship, every single party has a part to play. Whether it's that you were the best girlfriend that was married to the worst, rather the best girlfriend that was dating the worst boyfriend, there's a part that you played there. Whether it's that even just accepting to be in that relationship is already your part to play, or you were seeing the signs and you just ignored and you were making excuses. There's always a part that you play in it. So identify what your own part is. Once you identify it, then you'll be well on your way to breaking the unhealthy relationship cycle, right? That's the first thing. And then secondly, self-examination. Why have I been in these unhealthy relationships? What is the thing that keeps attracting me to these boys, to these girls? Why do I keep saying yes to these people that keep giving me and serving me breakfast? What is the thing that I'm seeing that is attracting me to them or attracting them to me? Once you're able to do that self-examination, you will know, you'll be able to get the root cause. Because it's easy for me to just say, oh, no, this is the kind of guy you should choose, kind of girl you should choose. But if there hasn't been a root cause analysis, you will keep going back to the same cycle and the same pattern. So self-examination, very important, right? And then be honest with yourself. The only 2 people you cannot lie to in this world is yourself and God. Those are the 2 people you cannot lie to. You can lie to everybody else. But you see, God knows us in depthly. And then you see you as well. You know what you know your actions. You know the reason for your actions. And you can never say, oh, I did not know. No, you know. And if you don't know, then that's also a problem, right? So identify do the self-examination. And as you're doing it, be very, very honest with yourself, right? And then study and be intentional about going forward. So we're talking about attachment styles now. Study what your own is, and then be intentional about breaking or evolving from that attachment style. That's how you'll be able to nurture more emotionally secure connections, which is you are working on yourself. Before you work on yourself, you identify what your issues are, then you begin to work on yourself intentionally. Read books, go for seminars, and then lastly, I would say therapy and counseling, very important, which is working with a professional. Sorry, therapy or counseling, because these are two different things. Therapy most usually looks at, goes as far as your childhood, looking at the very core of who you are. Counseling, it's more immediate. You're dealing with an immediate situation now. Counseling helps you to go through that, helps you to manage it, helps you to find solutions to it. So whichever one it is, either you go for counseling, you go for therapy, shall go for one of it, because then it helps. Working with a professional helps you to see the areas that you cannot see because you're not trained, and also areas how also gives you tips and tricks on how to now manage the life that you now want to start living, which is now to have more emotionally secure relationships and connections. Not just in your romantic relationship, but also in your friendships. I've had people come for counseling because of friendship heartbreak. There's such a thing as that. Maybe the friend that you thought was your friend betrayed you, or was not there for you, or that you are even the friend said that has been causing the heartbreak. So yeah, those are some of the practical steps I would say. So yeah.
That was detailed. It felt like I was in a session with you, honestly. I was I would say that was very detailed. And some of the key takeaways I picked up personally is first, we shouldn't blame our caregivers for any kind of attachment style we might have grown up with. Because while we might say it's their fault, sometimes we're just victim of circumstances and they just did the best
Exactly.
of their knowledge to us. And that's one important thing that I feel like I'll take out from this training, from this session rather. See, I've turned into a training itself because it's well detailed. So that's one of the things I'm going to take out from this session, and I'm really going to hold it dearly. And another thing is making sure that I intentionally look into myself and also figure out like attachment styles or how I've been not good to my future partner or my past partner, not my future partner, and how I can be better and how I can improve to become a better person to them. And I must say that we are really grateful. My embodiment is grateful. Our viewers are grateful because this session is not just for now. Is something that continues to remain relevant even after now. I'm sure if people go through this video 5 years from now, 10 years from now, these are things they're still going to need. These are things they're still going to learn from. And I'm grateful to the House of Tala. I'm grateful to you, Miss Oluchi, for your knowledge, for your wisdom. Basically, I'm really grateful.
Thank
And my
you.
onboarding up says a big thank you. And to our
Thank
viewers,
you.
we are grateful for joining us for this live session. And yeah, basically, so that's it. So watch out for our next session that will be happening March of this year, same next month basically, and it's going to be also glorious. And we might just have House of Star again on this session with us, but then till that time comes. But regardless, we are grateful and we just want to say thank you. And so currently we have nobody that dropped a question, so I feel like we are good. But then if there's anything we need to clarify, I'm sure my onboarding up team will reach out to you, and we are just grateful. That's all I've come to say. And if,
Thank
do you have any parting statement for us? Do you have any word of encouragement to give me and your fellow viewers before we call it a night, man?
Well, any parting words? I would say that we keep growing every day, right? And so it's the person who stops growing that really dies. We don't die when we give up the ghost. We die when we stop growing. And so it's important that we are always seeking to be better versions of ourselves every single day, not just every year, because now it's a new year, everybody has their new goals, new this, new that. But you should want to strive to be better every single day. That's the only way you can become a better person. That's the only way you can become emotionally more stable, and in whether in your relationships, romantic relationships, or friendships. So I would say keep growing, keep learning about yourself. Just today I learned something new about myself that I didn't know, for the last how many years. So always seek to know who you are. Self-awareness is the biggest gift you can give to yourself. as well as self-development and self-growth. So thank you to my onboarding hub for even doing stuff like this, whereby we can all come and learn. I'm sure today somebody at least has learned something new, which is attachment styles. Maybe you've been hearing about it a while now, but now you know what the attachment styles are, and you can kind of apply to your life. So thank you so much, Marvelous, and your team for doing this, and for inviting me. It's been such an honor. I do appreciate it, and thank you for your kind words. It's one thing to do stuff online. It's another thing for people to actually see it, resonate with it, and also, and it's helpful to them. So knowing that the videos I put out there, at least there's one person I've met today that, it's been helpful too. It's very encouraging. So thank you so much. Thank you for having me on board. Thank you for having the Tala company. We hope to work with you sometime again in the future. But regardless, well done, and I wish you all the best of luck in your future and your subsequent sessions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miss Oluchi, and have a wonderful day. Thank you, and have a wonderful night.
Yeah.
All right, so thank you everybody for joining us today. Until we meet again, I remain Marvelous Ayomide, Admin Manager and Operations from Onboarding Hub, and do have a wonderful evening.